Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation, and to Counterfire for organizing these brilliant events. I think they are so important at this really desperate time. First of all, it's an enormous honor to share the platform with three such extraordinary people. We're going to hear from Dr. Ghassan after this. Claire is exemplary in the work that she does. Whether she's an elected politician or not is irrelevant. And this young person, I'm not sure that I've gone 3 days in the last year without seeing him somewhere, organizing students, organizing young people around the United Kingdom, which is really absolutely crucial work. Because as Claire said, nothing can ever be the same again. And what is going to determine that is when students, when scholars, when young working class people realize this is the moment. The world faces an existential crisis. And we are either forever on this corrupt path, this murderous path, or out of the darkness of Gaza, of Sudan, of the Congo, we are going to forge a new and a better world. I want to, in a sense, carry on from where Claire left off by talking about certain other elements of the economics of conflict and war. I entirely agree with Claire. The roots of the genocide, and as someone, as the son of a Holocaust survivor, I have always been very reticent to talk about the comparisons between the Nazis and Israel. But I'm starting to think that if the word Holocaust means, as the dictionary defines it, a massive slaughter, great destruction, resulting in the extensive loss of life, I think we have to consider our nomenclature and ask ourselves whether what we're witnessing is not just a genocide, but a Holocaust. And of course, it has its roots, like apartheid in my own country, South Africa, in settler colonialism, in racist white supremacy. But let us not forget, as Lindsay reminds us all the time, of the key role that imperialism plays in where we are today, in what is happening around the world. Because imperialism is so essential to the capitalism under which we live. You know, a few weeks ago, there was a huge headline in the FT which someone sent me. I, of course, couldn't read the article because it now costs a fortune to read the FT. But the big front page headline, which I was able to see, was joy and elation, announcing that our defense companies were about to experience a bonanza of at least 52 billion pounds because Netanyahu had made it clear the slaughter wasn't going to stop anytime soon. What sort of madness does it take to believe that that is good news? But it is absolutely essential to the structure of our economy, which has as its foundations permanent austerity and endless wars. And how do they relate to each other? Well, the people of Somerstown, a short walk from here, because we are, after all, in Keir Starmer's constituency, are very, very keen to see Keir Starmer, who they haven't seen in the almost 10 years he's been our MP. Because in the Labour Party's manifesto, and in his victory speech, so-called, he mentioned that his government is going to make life better for Somerstown. The people of Somerstown would like to tell him that since he's been their MP, and even in the very short time since he's been Prime Minister, their lives continue to get more difficult. Their walls continue to be covered in black mold. They continue to have to use food banks to feed their families and to see any income that they are able to make actually devalued because of the levels of inflation in this country and the lack of concomitant increases in pay. What our economy does best is it turns public money, our money, that should be spent on housing, that should be spent on healthcare, on dealing with the climate catastrophe. We see that money turned into private profits. And how does that happen? Well, one part of it is our glorious defense companies that supposedly make Britain so great. BAE Systems, Rolls-Royce, Kinetic, and of course the jewel in Israel's crown that still has 7 factories in this country, Elbit Systems. So very briefly, these companies are the most heavily subsidized companies on the planet, subsidized with our money. That money, through the gargantuan systemic corruption in the global arms trade, then gets donated back to our major political parties and is used, amongst many other things, to benefit individual politicians, sometimes when they're in office, often once they've left office. This is known as state capture. When the state and its resources are captured for private benefit. Now, in the case of Israel, in the case of the slaughter in Gaza, it just so happens that the reason that Benjamin Netanyahu had to try and reduce the power of the judiciary in Israel, which some people claim is the only democracy in the Middle East. Israel is as much a democracy as apartheid South Africa was a democracy. Not at all, unless you happen to be a white Jewish Israeli citizen. Benjamin Netanyahu has been a massive beneficiary of the largesse of the defense sector. And when these companies sell Israel its weaponry, who do they use as an intermediary, as an agent? Well, when you're talking about billions of dollars, you've got to be careful with your money so you keep it in the family. Benjamin Netanyahu's legal advisor, who sits in the Prime Minister's office, who is a state functionary, who also happens to be his first cousin, is the intermediary through which the bribes are paid. But the reality is that Keir Starmer, just like Tony Blair, will also benefit from this largesse. He's not very good at politics, as all of us have known for a long time, and as the rest of the country took only 70 days to realize. It took them 775 days to figure out that Boris Johnson, too, wasn't very good at politics. 70 days with Starmer. He's guaranteed, he's a millionaire already, but he's guaranteed to be a multimillionaire from the moment he leaves office, even if he only lasts a few years, because of the largesse of the defense industry. But of course, to continue to oil the wheels of our political system in this way, we need conflict so that we can continue to increase our defense budgets, so that we can keep the bribes flowing. I'm writing a book at the moment called Making a Killing, How the West Profits from Slaughter in Yemen and Gaza. The figures of profitability are terrifying. We don't have the final figures yet. But the investigative research we are doing is horrifying in what it is revealing. So what do we do? Well, the book Monstrous Anger of the Guns, How the Global Arms Trade is Ruining the World and What We Can Do About It, is a very good guide. It has brilliant analytical sections to it, but far more importantly, it has sections on the activism that is taking place here and around the world and what is and isn't working. Lindsay writes about the extraordinary demos, the incredible protests that we have seen across the United Kingdom constantly for a year, and we have got to keep that going because that exerts pressure on our government to make what they try and proclaim are great concessions, which when you go beyond the PR are minor concessions, but they are concessions nevertheless. There is an astonishing piece by Ahmed Al-Nawak, who lost 24 members of his family in the bombing of his family home, and how he is resisting the slaughter. There is a chapter from Anthony Lowenstein, who wrote a book called The Palestine Laboratory, the best book on the Israeli arms trade. There is a chapter in the book that updates the Israeli arms trade and how it is profiting from the slaughter in Gaza. And finally, there is also a chapter from, amongst others from around the world, by our own Palestine Action, who talk about how they have closed down 3 of Elbit's factories, how they have caused Elbit Systems to lose a contract worth £280 million. But now the co-founder of Palestine Action is on trial under the Terrorism Act. And we have seen this act used against our journalists who are revealing the slaughter. Let me conclude by saying, the real terrorism is arming and profiting from genocide. If our government thinks that opposing this genocide is terrorism, we must use every fiber in our bodies to show them that they are the real terrorists. Thank you.